listening to Give God 90, where we're not afraid of the tough biblical questions, because we will dig through the language, the culture, and the history to find the truth revealed in the words of our Creator.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us today. I appreciate it. I am semi-supervised. As you can see, Myra's got a phone appointment today, so she's sort of here but not here. How's that? That works, right? A lot of people ask, why do I spend a couple of minutes at the beginning, doing what I do? And the reason I do that is because not everybody tunes in at the same time when they listen live. It takes them a couple of minutes to get in. So I take a couple of minutes to remind everybody about the website and about the books. Of course, Tradition to Truth, God's Universe, God's Rules, and Inheriting Lies. They're out there. And remind you that if you like what you hear, share it, right? It's that simple. And, I think just about everybody on every podcast says, make sure you subscribe, because it does help people find us easier. When they do the searches, they don't have to dig down all the way through a bunch of stuff to get to what they might want. So make sure you do all those good things. I'm going to jump into today's topic because it is, nothing less than controversial, right? It is nothing less than controversial. When we think about obedience, we have changed that word over the years. It's become something that, what do you mean? What do you mean you have to obey? Remember years and years and years ago when I was a little kid, in the marriage ceremony, it was love, honor, cherish, and obey. But we've taken that out. Because when we think about obedience, we think about being oppressed. Oh, you have to do something for someone. You have to do this. You have to do that. And that's not the way it is. Now, some types of obedience are for our benefit. It's just that simple. When a parent or an adult tells a child, look both ways before you cross the street, that's something that you should obey. Young children shouldn't play with fire. That's something you should obey. It's just that simple. But many Christians and even some Jewish believers have been led to believe that being obedient, especially to the word of our Creator, is no longer necessary. We often hear, it was for those people at that time. For the Jewish believers, we hear, the rabbis tell us, and they go on. And from Christians, it seems that their favorite excuse is, but Paul said, and I've talked about that often. And yes, we're going to rehash some of that today. Almost said tonight, and it's morning. Believers, or so-called believers, offer excuses. And I want you to remember that an excuse is nothing more, absolutely nothing more than a reason for failure. That's what an excuse is. And the reason they fail is because they believe the lies that we have inherited from our fathers. It's that simple. And that's why the title of the latest book, Inheriting Lies, is there. It comes straight from Jeremiah 16:19. Now, just like most pastors only preach what they've been told by their particular denominations, people will repeat excuse after excuse why they cannot or refuse to be obedient to the Creator. And we've all heard, and many of us have probably said something like, we can't do the sacrifices. Why bother? We can't go to Jerusalem, 3 times a year. Why bother? Maybe some use the excuse, but, the law was nailed to the cross. That seems to be a favorite. We're going to dig into that pretty deep here shortly. And, of course, we hear, Jesus kept the law perfectly, so we don't need to. I've heard that numerous times over the years. Maybe, just maybe, it's easier to be sinful than faithful. Or maybe the people who are offering these reasons for failure really do believe the lies they've been told. After all, the people who had taught them were probably people they trusted. And they learned from somebody they trusted. Which means Jeremiah was absolutely correct. We have inherited the lies from our fathers. Even though what may have started out as an attempt to help someone maintain their obedience, it's become twisted and corrupted. So we're going to look at some of these things that people talk about. And we're going to begin with Colossians. And in Colossians 2:14 from the King James, blotting out the handwriting of ordinances that was against us, which was contrary to us, and took us out of the way, nailing it to the cross. Well, if you look at that verse alone, it certainly seems that things were done away with. But let's look at some other English translations from the non-inspired version, the NIV. Having canceled the charge of our legal indebtedness, which stood against us and condemned us, he has taken it away, nailing it to the cross. Wait a minute. He's talking about Yeshua, Jesus here. He was the one nailed to the cross. He didn't nail anything to the cross. From the ESV, by canceling the record of debt that stood against us with its legal demands, this he set aside, nailing it to the cross. Again, Yeshua did not nail anything to the cross. Couldn't have done it. That would have been completely impossible. And I know that, it's just a figure of speech. How about the International Children's Bible? We owed a debt because we broke God's laws. Now, that is true. That debt listed all the rules we failed to follow. That, again, is absolutely correct. But God forgave us that debt. Well, he does forgive, absolutely. And I'm not going to take time to get into how that happens right now. But look at the next. He took that away. He took away that debt and nailed it to the cross. Now, this at least doesn't have Yeshua nailing anything to the cross. Okay? From the Berean Study Bible, having canceled the debt ascribed to us in the decrees that stood against us, he took it away, nailing it to the cross. Usually, the Berean Study Bible is very good about how they translate things. They missed it here because it certainly sounds like something was nailed to the cross, and something was, other than Yeshua. The Greek, when you go back and look at it, is not a great deal of help because when you look at the Greek, depending on which manuscript you looked at, you're going to find some things. Not all of the Greek manuscripts agree. The language, the verbiage in there doesn't all match. There are variants. In fact, when I was putting this together and I was putting Inheriting Lies together, I have the latest version of the Nestle-Aland Greek, what's it called? Anyway, it guides you through the differences in the manuscripts. Okay? There's a lot of variations in this particular verse. So when we're looking at it, we need to use some thought. First we have to put it in context. And then we have to think, wait a minute, what was nailed to the cross? What was? Now, the one thing that most manuscripts have in common was they were talking about the handwritten accusation. So what was it? Well, if we go back and we look at John chapter 19, verses 19 through 22, allow me, well, you don't have a choice. I'm going to read it. Pilate also had a notice posted on the cross. It read, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. Many of the Jews read this sign because the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and it was written in Hebrew, Latin, and Greek. So the chief priests and the Jews said to Pilate, "Do not write the King of the Jews, but only that he said, 'I am the King of the Jews.'" Pilate answered, "I have written what I have written." Pilate said, "I have written what I have written." If Pilate took the time to write in 3 different languages the accusation, are you seeing where I'm going with this? What was nailed to the cross? What accusation? You see, when the Romans would crucify someone, everybody had to know why they were being crucified. So the accusation against them, the charges against them, were put right up there where everybody could see. This is what this person did. This is what that person did. How did they know that there were thieves on either side who were crucified the same day? It was because there were signs up there. Now, Pilate did not take the time to write down the accusation for everybody. That was done by somebody else. But this being what's the word? What's a good word that I could use here? I don't want to say important, because even though it is important, it doesn't, you know what I mean. The whole surrounding, the whole complexity, having the time that Pilate himself would hear what the scribes or what the Pharisees and Sadducees were coming together for. He takes the time and he said he has written what he has written. The charges will stand. Amazing, isn't it? It's amazing. Pilate says he wrote the sign, and the accusations were not against us, as in you and me. They were against a single person. They were against Yeshua. They were against Jesus. And I'm going over this pretty quick, even though it is kind of detailed and kind of complex. If you look at, and if you get your copy of Inheriting Lies, I go into a lot more detail, okay? If you really want to dig into this and some other things. So that's what was written to, what was nailed, right? It was the accusation, King of the Jews. But let's look at it in some context. If we go back to Colossians 2, 11 through 15. Now, don't stick with me with this, because this takes some splaining, right? Remember the old I Love Lucy? Lucy, you got some splaining to do. I'm going to have to do some splaining. Beginning in verse 11. In him you were also circumcised, in the putting off of your sinful nature, with the circumcision performed by Christ and not by human hands. And having been buried with him in baptism, you were raised with him through your faith in the power of God, who raised him from the dead. When you were dead in your trespasses and in your uncircumcision of your sinful nature, God made you alive with Christ. He forgave us all our trespasses, having canceled the debt ascribed to us and the decrees that stood against us. He took it away, nailing it to the cross. And having disarmed the powers and authority, he made a public spectacle of them, triumphing. He beat them over them by the cross. don't know why I can't say that word this morning. Apologize for that. What Paul is attempting to explain is that Yeshua removes the things that are not necessary for you to have. That is a type of circumcision. Most of us think about circumcision only in one way. It cuts apart the parts you don't need. And what is meant by circumcision of the heart? It removes the ill feelings that we don't need towards others. Oh, wait, is that what that does? It takes away the things that aren't necessary. Think about that just for a minute. Paul then goes on to write, it was the faith in the power of God who raised Yeshua from the dead. Not, it wasn't Yeshua himself who got up and walked out. It was the Father who said, now is when the time is right. Now is when the time is here. He puts aside the accusation. He just he lays it down, says, in due time. Because remember, if we go back to Samuel, who is not only the king of the Jews, but the king of every tribe. It wasn't Saul and it wasn't David before that. If we look at 1 Samuel, Samuel says they want a king. The Almighty says, here's what an earthly king will do. They had a king. They just didn't want to obey the king anymore. See how I worked that in there, right? It wasn't the law that was done away with. It wasn't the first 5 books of your Bible that was done away with. It was the earthly earthly rules, the earthly things that bond man to their man-made tradition, their man-made religious doctrine. And many of those things actually divide us from the Father himself. They prevent us in certain cases from following his instructions. And, he just said, this'll be triumphant over them. This'll make a mockery of them. I've often said, and I know I have some folks from Great Britain who listen to this, but I've often said that our Creator has a very British sense of humor, very full of satire, very dry. It's just one of those things that he does that is amazing to me. When he wants to prove a point, he often does it with a little bit of satire, a little bit of sarcasm, all that good stuff thrown in there. Everything that Yeshua, Jesus, taught leads straight back to the Father's instructions. Everything. There are no exceptions. If you listened to last Thursday's podcast, and I hope you do so if you didn't, I said that if you had to rewrite the Bible, the things that you leave out would indicate what your favorite sin is. It's that simple. Now, there are denominational doctrines that allow every type of sin that our Creator hates. No exceptions. Doesn't matter who you are or where you live. Some doctrines allow theft. Some allow adultery. Some allow coveting your neighbor's possessions. Some allow murder. I want you to think about that. If you're a Christian attending a church who says that abortion is okay, their doctrine allows murder. It's just that simple. And And I'm not even going to go into the doctrines that allow sexual immorality. I'm just not going to take the time to do that. It's not going to happen today. Unfortunately, the oracles or the words of our Creator that have been entrusted to the Jews have somewhat been corrupted by tradition. They have kept them, they've guarded them, but they have surrounded them with tradition. Where in the Bible does it tell anyone to wear a kippah or yarmulke, right? Well, many Orthodox Jews will faithfully wear a head covering, but they refuse to wear the tzitzit, the fringes that we're actually instructed to wear on our garments. And what I've noticed, and this crosses every cultural line, okay? So common is the hatred for the command to wear fringes on the corners of your garment that when people see someone wearing one now, they get disgusted. And I think, it doesn't matter if you're Jew, Gentile, Muslim, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You see somebody wearing them, you know what it is. You know they're there to remind that person to be obedient. You know they're there to remind that person what the commands are. And you get disgusted. Oh, I don't know why they're wearing those things. If you read your Bible, you'd know. Number one, we're told to as a reminder, to be obedient. The argument over the sacrifices. Well, we can't do those, so why do we bother doing anything? And I've used this example before, and I'm going to use it again. The captives in Babylon, they couldn't offer sacrifices. And quite often, they would be killed if they even prayed to the God of Abraham. But look at Daniel. Isn't he a prime example? Through his faithfulness, his trust in his Creator, wasn't he rescued from the lions? Wasn't he saved from the lions? For all you good Christians out there. He did the things that he was able to do to the best of his ability. And he was rewarded with that, or for that. He was rewarded with visits from Gabriel, with messages straight from the throne room. Sadly, today, obedience is treated as vulgarity. Oh, it's a dirty word. You shouldn't. No, we don't have to do those things. Myra and I have experienced it personally. Many so-called believers will mock you and persecute you just because you're being obedient. We have friends that have been persecuted for being obedient. The insult, you can't get to heaven by works, and that's partially true. But it is through our obedience that our Creator knows the content of our heart. And it's openly displayed to everyone else. Think about that. Think about that. Through your obedience, everyone, when they reject the Almighty. Right? That's simple to see. Realize, Christians, you're not actually called to make disciples of Yeshua. We are able to show others how to live the way our Creator designed us to live. That was His entire intent. That's what He taught. That's what He did. That's what He lived. I have to add this part. Of all the Hebrew manuscripts, and I'm talking about of Matthew here, Okay? Shem Tov's Hebrew Matthew, there's over 28 now that are located at the end of Matthew. You know, in our modern English Bibles, it says go and baptize, and you know, it's called the Great Commission. It's not in the original Hebrew manuscripts. It simply says go. You have what you need. You have the instructions. You have the example. Now go. Go and be the example to others wherever you are. Go and do all the good you can possibly do. Go and do the best you are able to do. Go and live the way you're designed to live. And I'm going to repeat something I have used, and it will discredit those who teach that the law was done away with or nailed to the cross every time. It is the ultimate, the ultimate proof. Okay? And it comes straight from Matthew 5, verses 17 and 18. Do not think I've come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For I tell you, until heaven and earth pass away, not a single jot, not a stroke of a pen will disappear from the law, that's the first 5 books of the Bible, until everything has been accomplished. Now, has heaven and earth passed away in the last 2,000 years? This is still the same earth. It's still the same heaven. One day, in probably the near future, they will be destroyed and rebuilt, but not yet. Has everything that the prophets talked about been accomplished, been finished, been fulfilled? Not everything. Certainly not everything. It's close. You know, Damascus is basically in ruins, and that almost completes Isaiah 17. It's well on its way. Christians, I'm going to tell you something. Paul does not have the authority to change what Yeshua said. Paul does not have the authority to change what God said. No matter what you might think. And I'm going to say something right now that you know, it's just flat out true. Even Yeshua, even Jesus, if he would have tried to change anything that God said, it would have proved him a false prophet. He says a couple of times, well, he's recorded as saying a couple of times, I should say it that way, I can only say and do what the Father has sent me to say and do. I'm paraphrasing that, of course. I can only speak the words I'm given. I can only do the things he allows me to do. If he would have tried anything else, if he would have tried to change anything, it would have proven him a false prophet. And he could not be the prophet that Moses sent, or the prophet that Moses said would be sent. Now, not everything that's written by the prophets have been fulfilled. It's just that simple. A lot of things have, but not everything has. We need to be obedient. We need to show our actions need to show our faith. Do you still think that obedience is dirty or vulgar? I hope not. You know, your reasons for failure will not be heard on Judgment Day. You know, when you stand at the foot of the throne of grace, what will be heard? Your actions determine what will be heard. It's that simple. That comes straight out of Ezekiel chapter 18, by the way. Now, the Almighty knows you're not going to get it perfect. He knows there's things that are confusing. When you are able to say honestly in front of your Creator, I did the best I could with the information I had. I did the best I could with the information that I had available to me at the time. And when that is an honest statement, I did the best I could with the information I had, the chances of you hearing, well done, welcome home, are greatly improved. So, are you doing the best you can do? Or are you failing? What's your reason for failure? What's your excuse? What have you done? The good thing is you have the opportunity to change. You have the opportunity to turn it around. And that is something you work out in fear and trembling with your Creator. And I encourage you to do that. So until Thursday, we wish you many, many blessings, everyone.